humor me for a second here. What do you do if you're a game developer and you want to double the firepower available to the player? Maybe you'll give them a set of attachments so that they can increase the speed of the projectile, like a new long barrel or perhaps even a muzzle attachment. Why not also try and make it so that the weapon is more accurate by providing them with a laser sight? Or maybe you can let them increase the caliber of the weapon they fire. Hell, at that point, why not simply give them incendiary bullets and let them rain hell on their enemies? All of that is all well and good, but it is a bit complex, don't you think? Respawn Entertainment, on the other hand, had a much simpler way of handling it. Just chuck another barrel in the gun and call it a day. Today we're going to be talking about the Alternator, a weapon that has a rather unique quirk even amongst the strange arsenal that already exists in Apex Legends. This weapon utilizes 2 barrels, firing each of them in quick succession and trying to deliver as much damage as possible in as small a package as possible. Something like this, however, does beg the question, much like the Ripper from last week. Who needs something like this? Where did the idea of this weapon come from? What's the reason why this thing is in the game? And of course, what can we learn from it? For starters, we need to take a look at the story of this gun, and unfortunately, there isn't much to it, at least in the games themselves. See, Titanfall 2 and Apex Legends don't really have a lot of lore written about them. What little there isn't actually in-game. While I was looking for data about this, I actually stumbled on a Titanfall 2 Wikipedia article that actually had quite a lengthy write-up about the Alternator, but unfortunately it didn't really seem like that was anywhere in-game. Later on, I found out that this actually came from concept art that was created for the game, which thankfully is available on sites like ArtStation. Ryan Lastimosa, who actually works at Respawn Entertainment, has most of the art that he created for Titanfall 2 available on his profile, and there you can find that there is a snippet of information about where exactly did the Alternator come from. See, as it turns out, the Alternator is known in-universe as the SP-14 Hatchet, named that way because if you hold it in your hand, it looks a bit like a hatchet. It's a bit of a curious name, but it works. The weapon utilizes a rather unique recoil system that takes advantage of the 2 barrels, which fire 10mm bullets, which are a bit heavier than what you'd find on a normal SMG. The idea is that every shot alternates between each of the barrels, making it so that the one shot will compensate for the previous one's recoil. Heh. Alternates between the barrels. Alternator. Get it? Cause it... No? Well, anyway. The weapon fires slow, much slower than other SMGs in its category, but because of that it's actually quite a reliable weapon, making sure that it's accurate thanks to its unique system and hitting pretty hard due to the 10mm rounds it fires, which has made it one of the preferred weapons of what are known as Shinobi class pilots. For those of you that may not have had the pleasure of playing Titanfall 1 or 2, pilots are basically elite soldiers who are not just really good at fighting on foot, but that are also specially trained to control these giant mechanized suits known as Titans that usually carry some form of artificial intelligence in them. The pilot and the Titan basically work as one unit. Unfortunately, there isn't much information about what exactly does a Shinobi class pilot entail, although their name does give us a bit of a clue. See, Shinobi is a name that is also used to refer to ninjas, although I hazard a guess that they aren't really using it to refer to the historical Shinobi, rather they're just calling attention to the pop culture way in which we know ninjas, you know. Looking at them not as boogeymen, but the kind of people use scent to kill the boogeyman, to quote John Wick. With something like that in mind, it will certainly make sense that they will go for a weapon that is as light as possible and that carries as heavy a punch as possible. They want to make sure that they can move around freely, and they want to also make sure that whatever they shoot at doesn't get back up anytime soon. That in mind, what better way to do it than a weapon that will quite literally compensate for the recoil for you. That way it's easy for you to be able to one-hand the Alternator, something which you can actually do in-game, while also sweeping an area. The last part of the concept art does tell us that these pilots actually utilize the Alternator along with melee weapons. Just imagine somebody running at you, firing this thing, while at the same time carrying something like a giant freaking sword to their side. With an image like that in mind, it certainly makes sense that the weapons will become associated with the shinobi pilots in the minds of people out there. And all of this, of course, brings us to how does the gun perform in-game? This is rather curious, but it turns out that the gun changes quite a bit between Titanfall 2 and Apex Legends. Now, I don't have reliable data for every stat in Titanfall 2, but we do have a reliable source of information for the stats for the Alternator in Apex Legends, and that is from YouTuber Rogue9, whose data I will be using for the comparison that I'm going to be doing here. I highly recommend that you check out Rogue9's videos on the topic of firearms in general in games, as he usually takes a very deep dive into them and is just an overall fantastic little expose on all the changes and all of the quirks that all these things have. Anyhow, in Titanfall 2 you'll find that the gun is a bit like the UMP-45 in Modern Warfare 2 and 3. It's a very hard-hitting weapon, and very accurate as well, but it fires very slow, which makes it reliable, although a weapon that doesn't necessarily excel over all the other ones. Still, it is a gun that you can certainly be competitive with, and it's actually one of my favorite SMGs in the game, along with the R99. Now, in Apex Legends, on the other hand, while it is still a weapon that manages to hit hard with every shot, its DPS, or damage per second, is incredibly low, and it's honestly a weapon that I agree with Rogue9 when he says that it's the sort of thing that is good for the first couple of minutes of a match, but you will want to go and actually change it as soon as you can. It can be fired quite accurately from the hip, which makes it a pretty good weapon for close quarter combat, but again, you will be able to find other things that suit a role like that a little bit better down the line. With that in mind, and that strange difference between the two of one time being an excellent firearm and on the other game being one that is okay but replaced eventually, I started to consider what could make it so that it's still in Apex Legends, beyond just of course the fact that Respawn Entertainment probably wanted to have a low-level SMG for players to mess around with during the start of the game in low-level loot areas. Well, here's my hypothesis, and again I preface, this is just a hypothesis that I have with what little information I have from the games. This isn't necessarily something canon. See, as mentioned in their concept art, the Alternator is a weapon that was very much linked with Shinobi class pilots, and I'd hazard a guess that it's probably linked to many other special forces as well, as the weapon clearly has been tailor-made for them. Picture this. You are part of the board of directors of the Apex Championship. You're all tasked with finding the weapons that will actually be used in the tournament. You need to go and add quite a few interesting things. You perhaps add some more new toys for people to play around with, if you will, some state-of-the-art stuff, some heavy-hitting shotguns, rifles, pistols, the usual stuff. But you also want something that will attract the attention of the people that will be looking at this through whatever streaming service that they are using in the world of Titanfall. You want a weapon that they have maybe seen before, either in movies, games, TV shows, or God forbid if they happen to be as unlucky as some people have been in the outskirts of the galaxy, because they've seen it and even used it in real life. You want a weapon that carries a certain pedigree with it, that is iconic. The Alternator certainly fits that role, as a weapon that has been utilized by Shinobi-class pilots and that has put the fear of God into the hearts of men and women out there, those who have tried to defy the IMC or who have become part of the guerrilla that is fighting against the corporate oppressors. A weapon that, sure, may now be outclassed by some newfangled contraptions that have come out thanks to the ever-increasing arms race in the galaxy, but that still has a certain je ne sais quoi to it. There's a respect that comes with holding this thing in your hand, and knowing that pilots all across everywhere that you have been have lived and died thanks to something like this. It'd be a bit disrespectful not to have it in there. It's a weapon that, despite having its shortcomings, can still be quite a reliable companion, and that if you know how to treat it right, will make sure that you leave the arena as an Apex legend. Although really, you know, just get an R301. Seriously, that's fantastic gun. That's the one that I win my games with. So yeah, guys, there we go. That's a new video out and done. I want to thank you all very much for staying and listening to the end of it. And of course, I want to encourage you guys to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you found it interesting, and leave me a comment whether you like or dislike how I'm doing things so far. I'd really like to hear any criticisms you may have of this style so far. Like, I think it's no surprise to any of you, perhaps, that I've been very inspired by people like Ahoy, Stuart Brown, who does Iconic Arms videos, which are really good, and I'll leave a link for you to check them out, as well as Rogue 9's own deep dives into weapon statistics and the like, right? I just want to make something entertaining, but I also want to make sure that I can find my own style, because I don't want to seem like I'm just, you know, rehashing what they are doing into something else. I want to try and make this more unique, and I feel like that's going to take a little bit of time to really, you know, find the groove of things. So yeah, I'm also sorry that it took so long to make this new video. I originally wanted to get it done last week, but I had a bit of a health problem that I had to attend to that kept me from actually talking on the microphone as well as being able to edit in general. But thankfully that's resolved now. Anyhow, if I take too long to make the next one, I will probably try and get something like a quickie video out. Maybe something related to gameplay or just an interesting game that I find out there, because I'm always looking for weird games in general to test out and share with people. So, you know, I'll have to think of a name for that. But anyhow, hopefully I'll see you guys next video. Have a good week, everybody.